We're here with another great All Access with composer Batu Sener. Batu, thank you so much for taking time to chat today. It's so great to see you. We've had to cross our paths many times, and it's long overdue to have a chat. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So let's just start from the beginning. Talk to me about growing up, your childhood. I know we have a shared connection in that I'm half Turkish, you're Turkish as well. Talk about growing up in your childhood. And how did you discover music? When did it move from becoming a hobby to an actual like I want to do this for a living?
Well, very early on, I think, but I didn't really have much of a choice. I thought at first, anyway. The story goes that my parents heard me singing back tunes from the radio or the TV at the very early age, 2 or 3, whistling in the while playing with whatever I suppose I was playing with at the time. And they must have thought, oh, well, maybe we should get some music lessons for this kid. It seems like he's got an ear for this sort of thing. And then I started piano when I was 3. There's only one memory I have that I didn't want to go and leave the piano lesson, and I would have like I was hugging my teacher's leg so that the lesson would continue. Um, but yeah, very early on, and it almost like my parents knew at the time that I was always going to do music in the future. But piano lessons for years and years, uh, private lessons. Eventually, I went to a music high school, sort of specifically music only, that sort of prepares you for conservatories and such. And eventually got into a conservatory. So I was always going to be a classical piano performance
Right.
major. In fact, that's what I was doing. I don't think I was hardworking enough to become a concert pianist. Not that that's why I chose composing, but I was kind of a lazy student. But I did practice a lot still. But it wasn't until quite later, maybe I was 18, I've decided that I was going to do composition as a career, really. So it was a long realization. I always liked writing music. I was always thinking, I remember trying to practice some Prokofiev or something, and then like, this is so difficult. I'm spending all this time to play somebody else's music. It would be better if I could just write my own or perform my own. I think.
Yeah.
So eventually realized that that's what I wanted to do. The film music of it obviously comes a bit later, but so that's sort of a short version of the story.
Yeah. So how did you get to the United States and end up in Hollywood? What was that journey? And when did you discover film music? And was it initially appealing to you, or did you kind of stay away from it? Be like, I know, kind of want to write, just music composition and stay with that and concert music. And what made you kind of move over to visual media?
I always liked film music. I remember growing up watching films. I love films, and especially animated films. And I remember growing up and saying, "Oh, well, that's got good music, and that piece is cool." And I remember trying to download stuff from what was it, like LimeWire or whatever it was.
Yeah, man, LimeWire, Napster, Morpheus.
So I always loved it. I had a whole folder on my computer that said film music, and then I had like lots of things in there that not that I listened to much of film music, because I was more obsessed with like 20th century Russian music, Prokofiev and like Shostakovich and all those people. But it wasn't until I watched a particular film that I was like, that is what I want to do, which was Wall-E, the Pixar film.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's I mean, it's one of the great examples of what music can do in film, basically. And I remember going into the movie not knowing anything about it. Um, I did know about Tom Newman, but I didn't think that my life was going to change that way after watching that film. Especially, the first half, you're just watching this incredible piece of art with just music and a bit of sound effects. Just tells the story for you in such clever, particular way that it just made a big impact on me. And I remember at the end of the film thinking, well, whatever that was, that's what I want to do. And up until then, I was writing music, I was doing stuff, classical, whatever it was. But it wasn't until that film I I went home and I said, all right, so how does one get into writing music for movies or television and so on? Um, Obviously, a Google search brings up, schools in America, very easy. And I remember it was like maybe on the day it was due, the applications. I went on and did an application for Berkeley, uh, which was November, I think, or December. I can't remember. And then I got to an audition day in January. Came to Boston, so saw it as a tourist and did the audition. Eventually got in, and then they didn't have a room for me to start in the fall like a regular college, so they asked for me to come in right away in the summer. So I sort of packed up and came to Boston. It was pretty
Wow.
quick. I mean, from the moment I decided that I was going to do this till I was in America, it was about 6, 7 months, maybe not even. Um, so that was pretty quick, uh, and that's sort of a short story of how I got into this, um, which eventually led to some grad school in Chicago as well, because pretty easy to get to America as a student, and then you don't want to waste those years on your visa.
Right.
I was like, well,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do here. I'm not really ready to go to LA, and I'll just do another school, I suppose. So that's
So when you got to LA, I mean, you've been working with, of course, the amazing John Powell for a number of years now. How, and I'm sure there's a lot of young composers, wondering how do you get in contact with a veteran composer like that and begin a collaborative kind of working relationship with them. So how did you cross paths with John? Was it just chance, or did you see an event he was in and go meet him? Like how did that meet happen?
it was. I was very lucky. I mean, I've always been lucky ever since I met John. But meeting John was also quite lucky. Um, but initially, essentially, this is how it happened. The school in Columbia College in Chicago, they had a internship placement program. Uh, so you finish your studies in Chicago, and then they sort of guarantee an internship in LA for a few weeks as an extension of their last semester. So at that this was, when was it, 2014, I was graduating, and then we heard from John's studio that he was looking for an intern. So everybody got really excited. Oh, okay, well, we all sent our applications and hope for the best, kind of thing. And then I was very lucky that he picked me. And what I didn't know at the time, that Jermaine Franco, as people know, was
Yeah.
John's assistant for a while, and she was leaving uh, about maybe a few months after I started. I didn't know this, but um, basically the way I ended up staying here was Jermaine was leaving to take on other films and adventures away from John, really, and John asked me to stay on after my internship. That's sort of how we met and how we started. And even actually, when we met, he was just out of How to Train Your Dragon 2, I think, and maybe Rio 2. So he was pretty worn out and he didn't want to do anything. So my internship technically with him was pretty distant. I only saw him a few times. He was really interested in spending time with his son and such, which understandably. Um, but he was also, asking me to do things that you normally wouldn't ask an intern to do right away. He was just trying to test me to see, if I suppose if he was capable enough to stay and help him out. So that's how I met him, and been here ever since.
Yeah. So talk about what was like, do you remember the first project that he actually allowed you to tinker around with? And do you remember that time, and were you nervous when you started to kind of graduate to kind of additional composer, and were you nervous about finally kind of getting your hands on something and getting to work on things?
Well, surely. I mean, it's very intimidating to do anything. I mean, it's John Powell. you know,
Yes, yeah, for
the
sure.
first project that I worked on or wrote any additional music for him was Pan. It's a 2015 Warner Brothers film, and what's funny about it is that he took the film. Um, on it was I think it was April 1st, and he comes to the studio and says, "I've taken on a film, and we only got 30 days to do it." Uh, at the time, I didn't understand what that even meant, because how could you do that in 30 days, you know? Um, and he goes, "No, look, I know you want to write music. You're here for this, but this is such short amount of time, and I don't really know how we're going to end up working together, and if your sort of writing is going to fit into my score, if we're going to, it's just there's not enough time to sort of, uh, I suppose, teach you and show you and sort of walk you through how it's done." So he said, on this one, I need you to do sort of everything else that an assistant would do, basically, except writing music, because he just didn't. It's a very fair thing to say. Obviously, I didn't like hearing it, but also
Sure.
his point to it is like, well, of course, he's got 30 days to do this, and there's like 90 minutes of music. Of course, he's going to need people to help him, but also he needs people who he can trust and he's worked before, and I wasn't one of them. So that's what he said to me. I was like, well, you know what? Okay, fair. So we were just doing our regular things halfway through April, so we've got 2 weeks left now. It was one day, I remember, it was Anthony Willis, which I'm sure everybody knows, and Paul Monty are the two other additional composers on the film. They were here, and they were writing stuff, and John, so three of them. And halfway through April, there was one night where everybody sort of left at like 6. Somebody had a dinner, somebody had something else, and John left for something. And I'm the only one left at the studio, and I had all sorts of other duties that I needed to take care of. And anyway, all that done, and it's like 7 p.m. And I remember thinking, wow, I've been here probably 16 hours every day. It's time for me to go home and like watch some TV and then relax for a change, because it's been very tiring. But instead, I saw the cue sheet, I saw the cue board, and half the cues are sort of pending, and there's spotting notes. I've been in the meetings with the director, sort of I know the tunes, everything. So I thought, what the hell, I should give it a go. I picked one of the cues that sort of open, and I looked at the spotting notes and looked at John's tunes and whatever story needed at the time. Okay, it's this tune with this tune, maybe they can do it at the same time, whatever it was. And then eventually ended up writing a cue. And I left it on his computer, and then went home. And I just emailed him and said, okay, well, I've called blah blah at this studio, and I'll handle this if we're going to get this many players. Plus, at your computer, I left you a cue that I've tried, even though he said not to. So the next morning I come in, I'm just like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Is he like, did he hate it? What is he going to say? Is he going to be upset that I've even done it because he said not to even bother? Uh, the next morning he calls me in his room. He's like, okay, so we need to call this person. Can you email that person? And can you just make sure that we can book this and blah, blah. And, um, and then that was it. He didn't say anything about the cue that I've done. And I was like, well, he must have not heard it or listened to it just yet. And I've turned around, and as I was leaving, he goes, oh, by the way, I don't know if he did this on purpose. Like, if you ask him, I'm sure he did it on purpose, but I don't know. He goes, by the way, um, I've listened to that cue that you've done. It's pretty good. Why don't you well, let's open up and talk about it. We talked about it, and then eventually he went, why don't you do this other one as well? So that's how it all started, basically. Um, which is, for that moment, it was extremely intimidating. I just not
Yeah.
knowing what John would say and what he'd think. But he's extremely kind. I mean, he's the sweetest person. So of course he wasn't like, "What? I told you not to do this. Why did you do this?" It wasn't like that. But I think he welcomed it in a way. Now I ended up doing 4 or 5 cues on that film, which was my first gig with John.
That's amazing. That's, I mean, that's just, I'm just picturing John's interactions with that because I think, yeah, definitely on purpose. I think he was like, knowing John and his dry sense of everything, his British wit. So I mean, you got to work on so many amazing projects with John over the years, but I mean, I just want to congratulate you, of course, on Ice Age, Adventures of Buck Wild, which is your first animated feature score, and yeah, this is fantastic. So let's I want to dive into this because so we know that John has worked on, was it 3 or 4 films?
He's done 3, yeah.
Three of the Ice Age movies, which, of course, we had other amazing composers like David Newman, John Debney, kind of have their voice in the franchise, but John's themes really resonate with the franchise. So you got to kind of, metaphorically speaking, take the baton and now continue with this new feature. So talk about working on this. I mean, how did you approach this score? Of course, you wanted to pay homage to John's tunes, but you also want to put your voice into it. That must have been a challenging thing. So, what was your musical goals in working with the filmmakers, and what did you guys end up doing?
Uh, well, I suppose the way I got to do the film, so the road to it went through the other show that was announced recently, which is the Scrat Tales, the
Right.
6 episode sort of mini series thing. That I've done that first. Um,
Oh, so that came first. Okay.
that came actually first, and then I think as a result, people probably felt comfortable that they could give me a score of sort of Buck Wild size. So I feel like that helped a little bit getting me the job. But the way I think it all worked out initially was that John got a call saying, "Hey, we've got this other Ice Age film that we're doing. What, like, would you be interested?" But they kind of know that he wouldn't do it. And or do you know of anybody you trust who can deliver a score of this magnitude, basically? And then John very kindly, with all the experience that I had with him, all the additional music experience, plus that I've done the Scrat Tales show for Disney. He recommended that I should do it, and then I think everybody at Disney thought, well, okay, well, we'll give it a chance and see how he fails about it. you know? So that's how I got it, and obviously the title character being Buck, and many of the I don't know, 6 or 7 of the characters from the original series being in it, original franchise being in it, um, I was able to, and my relationship with John sort of meant that I could just use any of the tunes that he's done. And then they are really memorable tunes. I mean, the family tune and the Buck tune, all the tunes that he's done for 3 films they're all very good. I ended up using tunes from the second and the third film, as the story is closer to those than 4 and 5. But of course, there are new characters in it that would they required their own tune, and there's a new bad guy. There's a new concept of it. Also, it meant that I had to do 4 or 5 new tunes on it.
Yeah.
But obviously, it was a very nice thing. Sort of in your palette to have John Powell's tune is just very comforting in a way, as intimidating as it was. And of course, the temp of the film was just
Yeah.
all
All.
John Powell. So when you first watch the film with the music, which is like you do that once and hopefully never never listen to it again, you go, well, this is kind of working. Great. Okay, well, how am I going to do this and to make it work as well as this did? Um, so from that point of view, it was very, very scary. I mean, it was scary.
I can
First
imagine.
time,
Yeah.
it was the first time I had to do 75 minutes of music for a full length film. So it was a bit scary, very difficult to do, but it was also comforting that I had John's tunes as a safety net. If something wasn't working, I could be like, well, all right, I'll use John's family tune. If the family tune he's done probably would work. I mean, they're still a family, right? Um, so, but my approaches though overall was that I'll try I'll try to approach this, which whatever the story requires, right? Here's the first 15 minutes of the film. I think is just about what's happened, or family, us, and then all the people. So the first 15 minutes of the film is a bit more like old tunes and a mashup of all of John's material, really. But once the story gets going, about 10, 15 minutes in, then, all right, well, now we need to introduce new tunes. Well, these two need their own tune. So I was pretty much following the story, and I was not ever thinking, oh, I must, what's the temp tune, and I must do that. And I was pretty free to do it. I mean, the director and the producer, they were extreme. They were so fantastic to work with because
That's
they
good to hear.
gave
Yeah.
me the sort of freedom to do whatever. They were never like, you know what, we should use the family tune from the second film because this feels like that scene. Therefore, they were never like that. They were not making me do anything. I was just going with it, whatever the story telling, sort of imposed in a way. That's what I was doing, and majority of the film required new material, and which is a very good thing to to do on a big franchise. I mean, it's sometimes rare to get more than half of the score in the new material in a franchise film where you've got to use everybody else's tune. But in this case, a big majority of it was all my material, which I'm pretty happy about. And and I got to record at Fox for 7 days, which
Hey, I
is
got the Newman scoring stage. I saw your posting, and that must have been incredible.
yeah, it was supposed to be 5 days, but then it was at the time where the Delta variant was sort of raging, and we had to split just last minute. I think the Friday before scoring, we had to split the strings and the winds, and so I ended up getting 2 extra days. It was fantastic. Still, it was 7 days just going there and recording your own music. It's pretty phenomenal.
I know that's an amazing scoring stage as well. I mean, it's on the Fox lot and so much
Yeah,
history there, and
and I've been
yeah,
there for two of John's films. Yes, Ferdinand and Cold Wild. I've been in there and we recorded his music. Obviously, I was always in the booth, but and he was conducting. So it's just a fantastic place to be. It's just creating music, especially after all that hard work that, that you put into it for months. Finally, getting to the stage and recording is pretty rewarding.
yeah. I mean, every composer I talk to when they say that the magic moment is when they hear the music played by live musicians. So for you, was that experience of hearing your music, but also seeing these amazing talented musicians bring it to life? I'm sure that was the moment where it's like everything came together for you, right?
Yeah, it was, and I have to say, overall, the process of scoring Buck Wild was pretty smooth. I mean, I had a lot of time, which allowed me to do the whole thing by myself. I didn't need anybody's help because the movie pushed about 2 3 months. By the time I started sort of doing tunes and everything, I had an extra 2 months to prepare. But by the time you get to the scoring stage, you're so tired because so many details everywhere, and it's big orchestra score. So by the time you get to the stage, or right before you start recording, you go, I don't think I'm going to do this ever again. This is so difficult. Let's just not do this. I'm seeing my camera; it's pretty blurry. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
how
you
you.
got some Vaseline on the lens a little bit.
No, let's see if we can fix it. Did that work? Hmm. How do we do that? Well, this will be the thumbnail of your video.
Yeah, I was gonna. We'll just point at
um,
the screen.
Jeez, let me just turn it off and on. There we go.
There you
That's
go, perfect.
all right. What was I saying?
We were talking about bringing in
Coming to the
being at
stage. Yeah.
on the stage, everything coming together, hearing it for the first time, and everything. Yeah,
Right. So by the time I was at the stage, I was saying, I don't want to do this ever again. I don't know why anybody would do this. But just to answer your question, as soon as they start playing the music, you're like, oh, okay, well, that's why. I'd love to do, I'll go through that, even though however painless it was for me, I'll go through that intense period just so that I can experience this moment of the music coming alive with just incredible musicians and conductor. Yeah. I mean, I've felt that sort of thing with being in the control room with John and my own cues getting recorded in some way, but it's not your tunes, it's John's tunes, it's just your arrangement and orchestration kind of thing. So hearing it all and knowing every single thing that you've done in the computer finally,
yeah,
coming alive is phenomenal.
that's amazing. Is there a specific piece of a track or cue that or a sequence in the film that you scored that you were particularly proud of that you had a lot of fun working on?
Uh, yeah, I think everything was pretty fun, but there was a training montage that I had to do 3 times over because I was just not getting it right. The first time I've done it was too slow. The second time was I think it was in three or something, and then it needed to be in four. And finally, I've done a version that was working and fun enough and exciting enough. And then I was very excited to get to the stage to record that because just sometimes you go, you know what, I'm going to get to the stage. If you know you're going to get to the stage, you don't really try as hard to get to mock up the sound as good.
Right.
And it was still sounding good enough for the director and the producer to get excited about it. But I knew that it was just going to be something completely different when recorded. So I was excited for that, as well as most of the emotional cues, of course. I mean, you can try hours and hours; it's just not going to work. It's just the lushness of a of a big string section is just you can't recreate that with anything.
So were
Yeah,
you, what was it like when you got to show John some of your music? Was that, were you nervous to actually show him like what you did?
John was. I was a little bit, but the sort of understanding was that John, I suppose, whilst sort of recommending me to do the score, he was saying, "I'll make sure it's like done right for you." So
Yeah,
he
make
was,
everybody comfortable.
yeah, he was like, "Don't worry, I'll make sure this works." And John was very kind to attend the spotting session and then the review and such. So, and also I played him all the new tunes that I've done, and sort of getting his feedback on here's the tune for possums, or here's the tune for D, and here's this, and then him saying, "Oh, that's good. See, this bit is not catchy enough. Maybe you want to try that and change it." And then his obviously somebody like John Powell saying, "Why don't you try this? Or maybe do that in 8 notes rather than this. It'll be much better. A good quick turnaround." Whatever it is that he may say. So getting his feedback on the tunes before I presented before I even started doing suites and cues was very very important, and it's very illuminating as well. And he was also like he was in the meetings, and he was part of the final playback before everything got to the stage, and he basically heard the entire score along with the director and the producer, which was all done over uh, Zoom. It wasn't Zoom, it was Evercast or whatever it was, but that part of it sucked quite a lot
I can't
because
imagine. Yeah, trying to
same,
put all this together.
it's just not the same to have these people come over here and actually enjoy it in the room. I don't know how they listen to it. Do they have headphones? I can't see it. Like, it's that part isn't fun, but we made it work anyway. But so John was at the final review, and then he heard all the scores. So he was, I think he was pretty pleased with it all, and so was the director and the producer. So it, it it's I mean you can't put a price on having John's input on on an Ice Age score basically.
Of course.
I'm extremely lucky to have been here for this long and also have him allow me to do this in his studio, which I think made it so much more comfortable for me.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to him in one of our interviews, and I said, you really kind of become like a great mentor to Batu and Anthony, and then he was, as an Englishman, he can't take compliments. He's like, what? No, 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 no. He's like, they're fine, they're good, they're good. They're like, but it seems like he's been such a nurturing figure in your life, and it's so
Right.
nice to hear him. I mean, I know he really cares about you and Anthony and everybody around. You guys seem like such a close family at Five Cat, and it really comes across that way.
He sure was. I mean, he's very giving. I mean, I think he'd be a great teacher if he was ever.
Yeah,
Sure was.
absolutely.
But he's and every single cue you write for him, it's just like a learning experience, and that's one thing that's not changed. I've been here for over 7 years now, working in this studio with John, and we've done 8 films together, I think. And every time, every single cue, it's just that you. I mean, he's got just 60, 70 films of experience there, and he's just incredible at at sort of understanding filmmaking and just also obviously writing music. So everything he says, everything he shows you, you know what, baby, we do this. And it's
Yeah.
just it's always a learning experience that's just never stopped. So I felt, in a way, I felt pretty prepared for when John said, I think you're doing this Ice Age film. I freaked out, of course. I was like, oh no, I quit. I'm going to go back and live with mom by the beach.
Yeah.
I did freak out, but I was also feeling prepared enough to say, you know what, okay, bring it, I'll do it. So having somebody like John, especially John, is it's very important. Important for me, for my starting career, I should say.
Absolutely. So let's rewind a bit, and I want to talk about Scrat Tales, which is coming out on April 13th on Disney Plus. So of course, you did that first. So this is a series of 6 shorts featuring everyone's favorite prehistoric squirrel, and those segments were always such fan favorites. So I'm curious if that was your kind of starting point into into the Ice Age franchise. And what I really loved about Scrat is that for me, he always encompassed what I grew up watching were kind of the old silly symphony Looney Tunes, where it was just
Yeah.
kind of very kind of screwball, and it's really based on movement and music. There's no dialogue, and so I'm curious how you approach that, and did you have a lot of fun writing music in that style?
Oh yes, it was exact. Uh, it's basically that 3 or 4 minutes of six times, just no dialogue. All you have is him making weird noises and the
Yeah,
music, and it's so much in the style of our childhood cartoons. So I approached it the same way, as over the top and as romantic, as cliche and as crazy as cartoon music can get, basically. And you're right. Scrat always had. I'm not sure about the fifth one. I think on the first movie, Scrat didn't have any music over, not even classical stuff. And then John introduced Beethoven or Cacciaturian
right.
or all those sort of from the classical era, I suppose. And I'm not sure about the fifth film, but in this case, we wanted original music. We didn't want to just have arrangements of other pieces. So I was able to do two thematic material. One that is about family, I suppose, is Scrat and this baby Scrat
Yeah, yeah.
seen in the poster. It's sort of their little family, so there's a tune for that. And then I've done this really silly short motif for the acorn, which just repeats and repeats and gets into all sorts of major arrangements, small piano. It's just this wide range of crazy. I have to say, John always said to me that I overwrite even more than he overwrites, I think. And I was always proud of that. I still am. I mean, I just love complex orchestral music. Whenever I'm studying any scores, I get some Prokofiev, open it up, and oh look, everybody's doing this. So
Yeah.
I'm just always so amazed with what an orchestra can do. So this was the perfect opportunity to write something so outrageous, and because it's short, every episode is 3 4 minutes. It basically changes every 3 seconds. So the mood of it all, what you need to do musically. So it was such a blast to score this series, and it was Blue Sky's last project, basically
Yeah.
before they were shut down. And I had six directors for each episode, plus one co-director that was overseeing the whole show, along with the producer, and that was also done over Zoom. That was not fun either. And this was the beginning of it. I think when was it? It was like September or October of 2020. So we didn't really know about more sophisticated software at the time. So it was pretty tricky to get stuff over the internet to these people live playback. But yeah, it was just extremely fun. And I think I remember I played John just at the beginning, like the first episode. I've done the first episode, which is I think 4 minutes, and I sort of called him in and be like, "Hey, I want to show you this, and I've got this family tune, and I've got this motif, and I've also with these I've done the first episode." And I played it to him, and he sort of had some comments to say, and he finally got up, and as he was leaving, he said, "I'm confident that you're not going to fuck this up," which is basically John Powell for okay, this is going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was pretty happy to hear that, and then I've scored the rest of it as well, and it was just so fun. I didn't, however, have enough money in the music budget to record full orchestra.
Yeah.
So majority of it is samples, but I've made sure this time the mockups were better, and I was given some budget to record seven individual musicians, which one of them is John. Actually, he played the accordion on it.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
and I had a violin and a flute, and guitar. I played the piano, and what else did I have? Cello and some vocals. So that was pretty good and fun, and I think it was a good way of sort of showing how crazy I can write, I suppose. And I'd like to think that that helped getting the Ice Age film after that. The other thing actually happened, but John did the end titles to Scrat Tales because he loves Scrat. I mean,
Yeah,
Scrat, like you said, everybody loves Scrat. So he wanted to do. There's like a 25-30 second end titles. All the credits going pretty quickly. So he wanted to do something quite outrageous, and then you'll hear that when it comes out, and it's also in the album,
nice.
which is very fun. So at least he took care of that, and I didn't have to worry about that. So that was nice for him to offer.
Yeah,
Offer
you can switch roles a bit, get John to work for you for a little bit.
yeah, in a way, in a way.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to touch upon which I really loved is your solo album, Lugano Impressions, which I think everyone should go check out. It's streaming. Talk about the inspiration for that because I mean I know it's a kind of that's really a very personal thing for you, and it really is your kind of your style and your music. So, what was inspiration behind that album, and what made you want to kind of put it together?
Uh, that was well. Let's see. Uh, we've done Ferdinand, and then we've done Solo, Star Wars Story, and then we've done How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World in like 13 months back to back. Even though they all came in 3 different years, we've done it in 13 months, all three films. So by the end of it, I was ready to just get out of here and find some
Yeah,
place
I
and
know you were burnt out, man.
yeah, I was just, and we were going to, John and I were going to Switzerland, I think, for some concert that he was going to do there. And then I took that opportunity to book uh, a flight a bit earlier than when we need to be there and needed to be there. And I don't know how I ended up finding this place, but there's this town called Lugano in Switzerland. It's by Lake Lugano, I think. And this is the time where like Airbnb places weren't like through the roof expensive.
Right, yeah.
I was able to afford basically this right on the lake, literally like the floor of the of the cabin of the place I got is like above the water. It was like right. There's nothing around it. There's just very nice one bedroom place that I booked so that I can just go there by myself and uh, and sort of relax and read some book and do nothing and just don't think about anything. That was my plan. But then I invited a friend over instead. It's my fault. I invited a friend over, which is somebody that I really, really love. And then we grew up together. We went to high school together and then some conservatory as well. So we were there for 3 days. What happened, unfortunately, was that we were kids when we last hung out, and we were just different people. So
Yeah.
that sort of felt me. It made me feel sort of not upset, but just sort of realizing that people change, and then what you've been holding on to as the idea of your relationship is no longer the same.
Mm.
You've grown, and maybe the texting and the WhatsApp, whatever it was, is just you're doing you're communicating in a way that unfortunately didn't translate into real life after in fact
Right.
10 years we hadn't seen each other. We've seen each other one day or so here and then over 10 years, but that's about what's happened. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still a fantastic time. We had fun and whatever. It was lovely, lovely. But it's just from somebody that I really love from a friendship point of view, I just felt sort of broken about it.
Yeah.
And um, and then I had a moment there the last morning. I think I wish I could say I had a piece of manuscript paper and a pencil and I scribbled things. I didn't. I was just like singing into my phone, which is very boring comparatively. But I had some ideas about what this whole trip ended up being, and then I came to LA and sort of fleshed it out a little bit, and eventually made a suite about it, and sort of tells the story of us getting there and waking up in this incredible place, and and jumping into a very cold lake and having fun and eventually having enough booze that you reminisce and so you sort of look back and sort of I suppose remember the days, the time and the fun that you had in the past, and then how that's sort of no longer the reality, and then the realization of that, and eventually leaving the place. So it tells us a very personal story, of course, but I mean, it's good to have excuse to write music, basically. So I was right after doing all those three films, and we knew that we were going to have some free time here. It was nice to concentrate on something that I really wanted to do, which is always writing music. And I had basically, I was provided in a way with a story that I could tell via classical music. It's very easy in a way to write
Yeah.
score for films because the story is there for you. Then you just help with your music, tell the story. In this case, I needed to have my own story, so that's sort of what how it happened, and why it happened. And I'm glad I did it because I think being able to write all that in and sort of release it and take it out and have people listen to it just made me. It sort of made you have a what do we say about it? It's like it's a closure in a way. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
well, I'm happy about it. Yes, I'm upset with the fact that maybe we're still friends, but we're no longer what we were. And this is my way of saying goodbye to that part of my life and being open, uh,
Yeah,
to
I'm
the.
sure it was very therapeutic and cathartic
Oh,
to, yeah.
surely it was. And I played the piano, and then I had Charlie Tyler is a cellist who plays in LA, and John scores on my score, and he's actually done now 4 or 5 things for me. But he played the solo cello, and then we recorded at different times. I wish I could say that I was good enough of a pianist to have practiced and performed it live, but I played it separately, and I had him play on it, and he nailed it. It felt like he was playing with me. He was very very good. So if anybody likes a sort of chamber music, solo cello and solo piano, a little duet, I mean, it's it's very like you say, it's therapeutic. It's lovely to be able to write something that I care about.
Yeah, and it's a very it's an intimate listen and it feels personal, so I think people should definitely check it out. So I think it turned out really well. So
Well, thank you, thank you.
so to wrap things up, as a younger person in the industry, like myself, we I think we've gone through the most change I think we've experienced to get. I mean, I remember when I started at Disney, like Netflix was just a thing and they had a deal with Disney. Now we have all these separate streaming services. The industry is changing. There's mergers. Everything is changing. But you took this massive journey, leaving your home country, moving to a different country, making a life for yourself, making a career. So I'm curious, out of everything you've experienced in your time in your career so far, which is just getting started as well, but do you have any advice for other composers or filmmakers out there that are sitting at home listening and maybe they want to make the jump? Do you have any kind of real, I always ask this advice to, maybe other composers, or even like John, who maybe, as I much love John maybe a little out of touch of what the reality of what life is for maybe younger composers. So I'm curious from your perspective, what would you tell a younger composer today if they were going to try to jump into this industry?
Well, it depends if you're American, if you're doing it in America, that is, because it's pretty difficult to get visas and stay here, and it's expensive to do so. I mean, and especially with the pandemic, it's even more slow. So it takes a lot of money to be able to get a visa that would allow you to stay here and
Hmm.
work here. But aside from that, you're right. I think we're in a time in this business where I like look at Back Wild. I mean, it's just gone directly to Disney Plus, right? So I've
Yeah,
no idea if that Ice Age is going to have any sort of um, financial return for me, the same way John's 3 Ice Age films that he's done, plus all 50, 60 other films. And theaters, sure, even this was in theaters. I mean, especially in the past 2, 3 years, it's not really. It's just now coming back to theaters, but it's a very different time. And my honestly, my suggestion and my advice for people who would love to do this is that I think they maybe double think about it. Like, do you really want to do this? Because because
yeah,
it's I mean it's hard to get into this business, and like I said, I was very lucky to have met John. But over the years, I've seen so many interns and people reaching out to me trying to get into this business, and there are enough schools in America and around the world, I suppose, that every year, what, about 300 people move to Los Angeles just to sort of get into this business. This is writing for multimedia, that is. So it's a very crowded space in a way. So the only way, I suppose, to get anywhere is be able to write something that sounds not like other people.
Yeah, which is I think very important because a lot of people are like I want to be the next Hans Zimmer, next John Powell, whatever.
And
There's
we already
already
have a
they're already
Hans.
there.
Right, we already have a John Powell,
Yeah,
and then I'm probably in not a good position to say this because I've been working with John for all these years, and I think my overall orchestral writing and John's sort of match enough that I could, well, you wouldn't be able to say who did what. Like we sort of do
sure.
a similar thing orchestrally, which is why I suppose our composer and additional composer relationship sort of worked out well all this time. Um, and I don't think that Buck Wild has enough of my own voice. It's got certainly things that John would never do. He'd be like, I would never change chord that. I would never use this. Enough of it that's different,
Yeah,
but it's still in the franchise. And then I think, I mean, you can't just reinvent Ice Age music basically. So
sure. Yeah,
it wasn't enough of a here's my voice for me to say, but uh, but I'm hoping that the sort of the next film I do is going to be a bit different than that. But if you don't have your own unique voice, I suppose, I mean, this is the same advice that everybody says, I suppose, that it's just not going to work because if you just sound like anybody else, and they can just go and find and hire that anybody else instead
yeah,
because they don't need you, which is also why some interns and assistants that come to LA or reach out to me uh, say, here's what I can do. This is in the style of this and in the style of this. And honestly, sometimes I have the time to listen to it. But if somebody sends me a demo of in the style of me or anybody else, I'd be like, well, great. But what can you do really?
right. Yeah, there was a. I think I've said this in interviews before, but there was. I remember sitting at the ArcLight, rest in peace, ArcLight. But it was after I think
Yeah,
Guardians of the Galaxy or something. Sometimes they'll play like footage of behind the scenes after the end credits and something. And it was James Gunn talking, and he gave this piece of advice that always stuck with me. He's like, don't come to Hollywood looking what you can get out of it. Come here looking what you can bring to it, like what you can offer from yourself. And I think that speaks volumes. And honestly, from living there for over a decade and just seeing, me growing in my career and people growing around me, it's just like the people who have unique voices and are true to themselves. Honestly, they rise to the top, and
yeah.
they're the voices that
The,
stick around.
the other a good advice that I've received is this, and then I still follow this as much as I can, is that in order to get better or have your own voice or figure out what your voice is, I suppose, is that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
constantly have to write. I mean, I'm still every day trying to write music, and even if I don't, then I study. I mean, there's not one day I don't open up a score and look through things or try to write something or just mock up something or I find a page of a symphony from whoever that I like, put that into Logic, expand it, change it. It's just it takes a lot of investment, and then if you don't continue to try to improve yourself, then maybe you're never going to find your own voice, and then you're always going to default to what we collectively heard from film music and classical music, and then it's very comforting and safe to just do that because
mm,
that modulate to this and it's great, but like, or this instrument does it this way. It's just if you don't experiment, then you're never going to actually see what you are or what you can bring to it. Like you said.
absolutely. Well, Batu, thank you so much for this chat this evening. Thank you for being so open and talking about your career and your process. And I mean, congratulations! It's so amazing to see the score or see the film and listen to the score. And yeah, everyone should check it out. It's on Disney Plus, and Scrat Tales coming April 13th. So, and can't wait for what's next. We got to do this again sometime.
Okay, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. My pleasure.